What's up, everyone? Nick from ResoNix Sound Solutions here. Today we have a quick little video on something that has sort of plagued me, I guess we could say, since the beginning of my history of tuning car audio systems, being a DSP tuner, I guess you could say. And that is overall long-term inconsistencies and reliability of measurement microphones. Since the beginning of my days tuning cars, I always had problems with measurement microphones after owning them for, about a year, give or take, depending on how much I use them within that year. Where towards the end, they would start acting a little funky, or something about the measurements where I would just stop trusting. Like, I felt like I couldn't trust them, not because I just felt like it because they were old, but because things were just pointing that way with measurements, and overall reliability too. So I did a little test for myself with a bunch of new microphones and a bunch of old microphones that I have to really get an idea of what's going on. Again, nothing crazy, but if you've been following me for a little bit, you've probably seen me pushing people who are serious about tuning cars, or even if it's just their own car. If this isn't just going to be a quick, like, one-time thing for you and your system, then it's probably best to invest in a good and proper microphone. And I never really had any data to show anyone besides my own anecdotal evidence based on experience. But I finally wanted to put something together to show you guys exactly what's going on. So this is, before we get into it, this is not a video about the quote unquote sound quality of different microphones, or the accuracy of different microphones. All this is about the consistency of microphones over time and from day to day. So I've been tuning now for, probably somewhere around 10 to 12 years, tuning cars for that long. Obviously, there are people that have tuned longer than me, but in that past decade or so, it's been almost every day or every week occurrence that I'm, tuning cars. So I do have a lot of hands-on experience and, a lot to take away from my experience with various microphones and, their reliability and what they're displaying. So these issues have kind of shown themselves across multiple different tuning methodologies that I've done over the years. They've showed themselves over different tuning hardware, different tuning softwares, single mic measurements in the car, out of the car, mic arrays, moving mic measurement, you name it. This issue has always kind of been a thing that I've experienced until relatively recently. My theory on the situation actually comes down to the cheap microphones using cheap microphone capsules inside of them to, take these measurements. I think that just over time they break down and degrade. I don't know if it has to do with how much use they get. I don't know if it has to do with, just even existing. They just start to break down, though we will dive into that with some of the tests we have here. And also, I think temperature itself, and as well as shock, can affect how these microphones behave. I've noticed in the past, maybe leaving a microphone in the back seat of my car for a couple of days in the summer that, afterwards it just no longer measured correctly, properly, consistently, or leaving it in the cold, in my shop when in the cold winter months, and then, I'm gone for a weekend and, it's below freezing for a decent chunk of time, or just dropping it or just using it over the years. I've over the years, I've had probably over 30 different microphones that I've used to tune cars. Pretty ridiculous, but whatever. And I've noticed all of these issues, like I said before, with all of these different pieces of hardware and all these different methods. And I really wanted to put a stop to it because if I can't have consistency even from day to day or over time, then that was affecting my customers' end results. And I didn't like that. Combine that with the fact that I was buying a new microphone, towards the end of my cheaper microphone days. I was buying microphones probably every 9 months, and I was getting the Cross Spectrum Labs calibrated ones. So here I am spending $200 on a microphone every 9 months. And eventually I was like, you know what? This is getting a little out of hand. I'm going to look into a better solution, something that is more up to par with, this being my career and this being something I take very seriously and something that I use day to day. So I started talking to some pro audio guys, some studio guys, and all of them pointed me towards one of a few different microphones. And all of them were, frankly, much more expensive, but at the end of the day, again, is what it is. As long as it would last, it wouldn't really matter. And all of them seemed to feature marketing materials where they discuss, their microphone capsules being reliable, consistent, serviceable, not susceptible to shock or weather. Some of them even waterproof rated, And eventually I dove into getting myself an Earthworks M23 microphone about 3.5 years ago. And from there, I've had that same M23 microphone, not just using the same M23 model, but like the exact same M23 microphone is all I've been using for the past 3.5 years, outside of some dabbling with, some mic arrays and other methods and things like that. But the M23 was my only single mic measurement method for the past, about 3.5 years. And recently got a big order of Earthworks M23Rs in stock to include in our soon to be available ResoNix tuning kits. But before I even made those tuning kits available, I did again want to dive in and show people like, hey, let's actually see what's going on here, and even like see for myself firsthand directly on the same screen what's going on, instead of again just using my anecdotal evidence over my experience over time. So what we have is an Earthworks M23, an Earthworks M23R, a Dayton Omnimic V2, and a Dayton UMM6. Now, the M23 and M23R are pretty much the same microphone. The only difference is the R is built or calibrated. They don't get calibrated. I guess I'm not using the right terminology here, but they fit within a tighter tolerance of measurement from themselves. It's something like plus or minus quarter or half a dB, while the M23 is plus or minus like 1 dB. Both very, very tight tolerances, but the M23R is meant for more like lab grade measurements and stuff like that. The M23, like I mentioned, is 3.5 years old and has been what I've been using for most of that, most of my tuning, and has definitely seen better days. The M23R was brand new out of the box. When I started measuring it, I actually had to peel the sticker off the box. The Omnimic V2 is a bit older. I've had it for maybe 5 years, but it was never opened. Again, like I had to take the sticker off the plastic wrap inside of it to even start taking my measurements. And the UMM6 is probably 6 or 7 years old and was used for about a year, probably. So we have a few different ways to look at this. One, we're just testing, 4 different microphones, but, we're able to test. Oh, before we even get into this, one thing, like I said, the M23 and M23R are pretty much the same microphone. The Omnimic and the UMM6 are also pretty much the same microphone. Both of them are made by Dayton. Both of them are the same hardware from what I can tell. Both of them have the exact same specs on the website from what I can tell. Even having a friend who worked at Parts Express in the past has confirmed to me, yeah, they're the same thing. The OmniMic just features other hardware in the kit. OmniMic is a whole measurement suite, kind of like Room EQ Wizard is. And, you know, when you order the OmniMic, you get the OmniMic, the software, and some other measurement pieces of hardware with it. So, you know, again, I'm pretty damn sure this is the same exact microphone as the UMM6. Same body, same design, same behavior, same specs, same everything. I'm not going to say with 100% certainty it's exactly the same, but everything points towards that it is. So, again, brand M23R, brand new. M23 is, 3.5 years old. OmniMic, brand new out of the box, but, has been sitting for 5 years. UMM6 is about 6 or 7 years old and was used for about a year. And yeah, I guess now that we had one more microphone. It was the Cross Spectrum Labs MiniDSP UMIK-1, first version. This was probably the microphone that I had the most of, and I only had one left. And I tried to include it in this test, but every time I plugged it in and went to go start taking measurements, the software would crash. I think the microphone is shorted. It worked when I stopped using it. Otherwise, I would have just thrown it in the trash. I remember it had some connectivity issues where, like, if you hit the USB hard enough, like, it would lose connectivity for a second and you'd have to just set it again in your preferences. But it never had any issues with, like, it causing the software to crash or anything like that. So I unfortunately could not get any measurements of the MiniDSP UMIK. I guess, and that one was, just for reference, is maybe 4.5 years old, because I got it about a year before my M23, and it was used for about 9 months. So yeah, 4.5 years old, used for 9 months, sat in my, little tuning cart for a few years, and now is crashing softwares. Anyways, let's get into it. So the test is pretty straightforward. Each microphone, I measured my car audio sound system using correlated pink noise at the exact same volume, back to back. These first 4 measurements right up here were all done yesterday on September 9th. Just for reference, it was a pretty warm day. It was pretty dry out, upper 70s, I think it was yesterday. And then the second set of measurements down here are, the second day, which is today, September 10th. And I did them this morning. It was a little bit cooler outside and feels a little bit more humid. It's definitely very cloudy out. I think it's going to rain. I don't know. The only reason I'm saying that is I don't know if this has to do with temperature, humidity. I'm just trying to provide you guys as much context as possible. Again, this is not a lab grade scientific test here. I'm just going about measurements as if I'm hopping outside to tune my own car. That's it. So all of them are done at the same level. What I did in this, why I have 2 Room EQ Wizard windows open with the same measurements, on this one, you could see I split them just so we can get a decent view. The red measurements are day 1. The green measurements are day 2. And we can see, the M23 is at the top. The M23R is the second one. The OmniMic is the third one, and the UMM6 is the bottom one. And again, red is day 1, green is day 2. What we're really looking at here is pretty simple. I noticed, over the years that one day I might tune a car, measure my car and tune it, and it measures to my house curve perfectly, and, everything's great. And I'm like, all right, I'll resume or mess with it more tomorrow, and then I hop back in the next day and it measures totally different, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This is not cool. Like, and I used to think, oh, my system is changing from day to day. Like, that's not good. Yeah, like, cool. We got to make some adjustments here, or it's breaking it, whatever excuse you want to throw at it. But as time went on, I started realizing, like, I think this might be the microphone doing this, not the system. And I also mostly noticed it in microphones that were older and, like, coming to their end of days. I don't really notice it as much these days using a much more robust and consistent microphone, as, we will see in the test. But yeah, so M23 up top here, very minor deviation from day 1 to day 2. These small differences could be from the system itself. Like I said, different temperature, different humidity. And obviously that's consistent with all of these measurements from day 1 to day 2. But what we really want to look at here is how much these differences swing. The M23R, some slight differences also, but also, again, pretty damn consistent. The brand new in box, but has been sitting for years, Omnimic, relatively consistent from day to day. Not as close as the M23 or M23R. We do have some deviation in the upper frequencies, and, a little bit down here, which is present in most of these, except for the M23. But, yeah, it's just a little bit more than the M23R. Again, nothing crazy, but it really starts to deviate, low end as a whole, mid bass as a whole, top end as a whole. It's kind of just all over the place, even with frequency response swings that don't really make much sense. Like, they're following, some similar paths, but are just very different. Over here it gets a little weird, but I don't know. I guess maybe here I should dive into how these measurements were taken. Again, it was correlated pink noise. I'm sitting in my driver's seat and I'm moving the microphone from ear to ear, back and forth at a consistent rate, off a consistent distance from my head. This is how I tune cars every single time, every single day for the past God knows how long. You can throw out there, oh, the measurements themselves aren't consistent because you're not having it in the perfect spot. Honestly, I doubt it. We can make maybe another video on that. Maybe later I'll make another video with single. I have wanted to do this single mic, with me sitting in the car, single mic with me out of the car, moving mic with me in the car, moving mic with me, out of the car, and just see what these and different moving mic methods and stuff like that, and just see what the differences are. I can tell you firsthand that the differences are small, even with slight inconsistencies from moving mic measurement methods. So I really don't think that would be it. But yeah, these are the differences on these sets of microphones from day 1 to day 2. Take it for what it's worth. What I'm seeing here is we're getting a little bit more consistent results from the better Earthworks M23 and M23R microphones. The brand new UMIK is relatively consistent also. I would say it's acceptable. I really wonder what this was. When I did the measurement, I did a second one just to make sure that, like, this wasn't just a, measurement inconsistency. By the way, I did that for all of these. And obviously there's no need to have 100 measurements here, so got rid of those. But, this is how they were measuring from day 1 to day 2. And again, take it for what it's worth. The new Omnimic seems fine, but over time, these cheaper microphones just seem like it's not standing up to the test of time, and something's happening. I don't know what it is, but something is happening. And we're going to see that with the next set of measurements, where I have them all stacked up at the same level, and we can see the actual differences from one measurement to another. This is where the eye-opener is really going to lie, I think, for most of you. So let's hop over to that. So here's the file with all of these different measurements. I have it a little bit zoomed in on the decibel axis over here. So it does look a little bit more dramatic, but we can see the differences a little better. So yeah, let me clear these. And I guess what we'll do is compare. Let's just continue comparing day to day. Actually, no, we already did that. There's really, you know what? Let's just do it. We're here. M23, day 1, M23, day 2, you know, M23R, day 1 and 2, OmniMic, day 1 and day 2, and UMM6, day 1 and day 2. But, you know, let's just compare day 1 as a whole. And we can see here's the Earthworks M23, Earthworks M23R, pretty damn close. The OmniMic, a little bit off, but again, not horrific. And here's the UMM6. This is where things got bad, where I was like, oh, shit, yeah, that's a problem. Especially with it being these issues mostly residing in the mid-range frequencies, you know, between 100 hertz and, you know, 3,000, 4,000, something like that. That's where we're most sensitive to these swings in frequency. So I don't know. And then we can look at, you know, day 2 as well. Same deal, you know, OmniMic not horribly off from the 2 Earthworks mics, but the 2 Earthworks mics are pretty much on top of each other, dead nuts onto each other, from one that's 3.5 years old to one that is brand new. And then the OmniMic and the UMM6, you know, again, brand new OmniMic. I don't know what is happening here on the second day, why it has a dip, but you know, the older Dayton microphone just having these crazy swings in general is just unacceptable. You know, there's not really much to say because the graph really says everything for me. But to recap why this is a problem, or at least for me, you know, tuning cars almost every day for years and, you know, for many customers, and I want to do the best job I can. And even if I'm not doing it for customers, even if I'm just doing it for myself and I want to dial my car in, you know, to the best of my ability, I just spent, you know, $10,000+ on equipment, and I spent 100+ hours installing it all. And now it's time to dive in and make it all sound good. The last thing you want is a microphone that, you know, you had from your last system 5 years ago that is telling you a completely different story than what's actually going on and measures different from day to day. That's a little crazy. So, you know, if you're serious about, you know, tuning cars or even just making sure your system is dialed into the best that it can be, and you know, you do want to improve your tuning from day to day, you're not really going to be able to do that unless you know for a fact that your hardware is not sabotaging you. You know, how are you supposed to get a reference yourself if your microphone is all over the place? You'll never know what's correct and what's not. Now, some of you, I will add this, maybe not some of you, I don't know why I said some of you, I meant me. I'll be the first person to tell you, frequency response on a global sense, to me, is a little bit less important than frequency response side to side. For me, matching frequency response from side to side is definitely more important than having a perfectly nailed frequency response just totally as a whole. And that's because it's easy to pick out hot spots or missing spots and, you know, dial those in by ears. Maybe if you don't have a reference or really know what you're listening for, that gets a little bit more difficult. But even then, like those global tonality differences, like, don't stick out to me as much as, you know, left to right being off and causing imaging and staging issues. So, you know, this isn't to say you can't use one of these cheaper microphones. You know, throw down a quick, basic, or even not so basic tune and have a great sounding end result. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is I just want to show you that, you know, these cheaper microphones are not as reliable over time and not super reliable day to day, especially over time. I don't really know what else to dive into here. I feel like I had more thoughts in my head, but frankly, they have escaped me. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you've noticed this before. I know many other tuners have mentioned this to me in the past. Even guys that use mic arrays have mentioned that they've noticed this to me. Even the guys that use the expensive mic arrays have mentioned that they have the same problems over time, that I'm experiencing with these basic cheaper microphones, or even them breaking like my MiniDSP one did. These cheaper microphone capsules, I really think are the problem, and they're not serviceable. And these, let's just say, more expensive ones like the Earthworks M23 or M23R, their microphone capsules inside are much more robust. They are not as susceptible to shock. They're not susceptible to heat or cold or, dust or water. I know the Earthworks M23R, when I spoke to them recently, they said it passed, I think it was IP65, waterproof testing, which is pretty crazy. I can tell you firsthand that I have dropped my M23 probably dozens of times to where it's even dented and scratched and beat up, and and it still performs the way it does. Again, not trying to sell you anything, not trying to convince you that you have to have an expensive microphone set up to have a good sounding car. But anyways, buy the ResoNix tuning kit, coming soon. Now, in all seriousness, I just wanted to show you guys what I've noticed over the years. And again, leave some thoughts in the comments. Let me know your experiences. Thank you for watching.